Everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric on our brand new retrospective series, Castlevania Chronicles, where we will be reviewing and talking about the history of Castlevania from the absolute first mainline entry to the absolute last mainline entry. And of course, we're going to kick it off with the original Castlevania on NES, or Akumajō Dracula, on the Famicom disk system. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like, subscribe, that notification bell definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well, because it's not easy making series this long. But I just cannot believe how old this game is, and it makes me feel old because I was alive when this game released. I was not that old whatsoever, and I didn't play it on its initial release, but I did play the original Castlevania on NES as a kid, and I have been playing this series ever since. And to start talking about this franchise from the beginning is so much fun because this is just gaming history. There's a little background in this game. If you're not familiar with the Hammer horror series or other classic horror film properties, Castlevania is taken from a very cinematic direction, so much so that the developers said that they wanted this to feel almost film-like. And a lot of the bosses you're going to be fighting in the entire series, not just the first game, are whole cloth borrowed from classic horror movies. Sometimes I will tell you where they're from, sometimes you just have to tell me in the comments and see if you can spot it. But right off the top, it's not a game about Dracula without a bat that's the first boss, and I will say as a kid, this boss just gave it to me time and time again. The patterns are very inconsistent in his swooping, and it was a very early introduction to just how hard Castlevania as a series and game was going to be, because this game pulls no punches. If you started on the NES or something like Mario Brothers, you were going to think that games maybe weren't that hard, but with Konami and Castlevania, once you got to these games, they weren't going to hold your hand. You were going to die, sometimes because it was your own fault, sometimes because the game wanted you to die, but that's the Castlevania flavor. These games aren't fair. They'll kill you when you least expect it, but you need to deal with pacing and memorization to get through them. This is not the type of game that you just blindly charge left or right and start attacking. You need to be patient, you need to look at what's ahead of you, and you really need to think what your next move is. But you don't always get that time to think about it. Some place like here, with the flying Medusa heads, another staple of the Castlevania franchise, they're just gonna knock you back and throw you into a pit to your death. And tell me if you know the famous movie where the Medusa head showed up in. It has a mechanical owl, and I'm curious to see if you guys remember. His name was Bubo. But it's just so incredible to think how old this series is and how iconic it is in gamers' minds. So much so that the anime on Netflix has been a huge hit for them, and there are even more seasons coming out. It's wild to think that that all came from this one game. But like I said earlier, this isn't the type of game that's going to hold your hand. You touch these spikes coming down, you are immediately dead. You fall into a pit, you're immediately dead. You get hit by an enemy and you're knocked back, chances are you're going to die. But you see, I just grazed that spike and it absolutely killed me. But like I mentioned earlier, with the bosses, they're so much fun and they're so iconic. Obviously, Medusa heads, not something that Castlevania made up, and 99% of what's in Castlevania is from some film property, book property, or otherwise a tale from antiquity. It doesn't really make anything new. What it does is it pivots and changes around what already existed in the horror lexicon and provides it to you in a completely different way. And the developers at Konami were genius in doing that because the game is instantaneously familiar even if you've never played it before. Now I'm assuming most people that are going to watch this series have played Castlevania, but when the first person in North America bought this game and put it in their NES not knowing what it was, they would have been familiar with almost everything. They would have quickly grown to hate the Flea Man because he haunts my dreams. But the soundtrack in this game is a banger, so go ahead and listen. I will be right back and talk more. That is an iconic song, and this series has iconic music, but the first outing, it was composed by Kanoyu Yamashita, and I'm not sure if my pronunciation is correct, but I tried my best, and to think that this was her first soundtrack ever as a soundtrack video game designer. This is a home run grand slam 10 out of 10 hit any day of the week. And Castlevania always has impeccable music, but I love even in this level right here, you see Dracula's tower in the background. It's telegraphing what is coming up. And one of the developers of this game talked about wanting to have a very cinematic or film-like experience. They did really good with the art, especially on the NES, to really kind of foreshadow what's happening moving forward. It's almost like it takes place in a 3-act structure. And of course we have the mummies here throwing their bandages, and you saw that wall meat right there. This is the game that invented wall meat. I mean, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I'm not eating a roast out of a wall, but it happened here first. And I do love the map transitions. You fall down into this pit and continue on throughout the game. Dracula's even set booby traps for you. But this game, like I said earlier, is not forgiving, and if you like that type of game back in the day, you love this entire franchise. But you'll see right there, I just fell right into the water. That is my fault because I jumped too late. This game just does not want to forgive you, but it does telegraph some things. You're going to see there, I'm walking through those pile of skulls. I'm not standing on top of them, but down here I forget that I can't stand on them because they look like a platform and they throw me to my death. The design in this game is impeccable. It is always teaching you what it is that you should be doing, and if you're not paying close enough attention, like I wasn't there because it's been a couple of years since I played the original on NES, you're gonna die, but you're gonna learn from that experience. Now the one thing I will say that never feels fair is Fleaman Corridor here. Sometimes the RNG is friendly like it is here, and it just throws them right down in front of you so you can whip them quickly. Sometimes they get clustered up on the screen and it is so hard, but I do love in some instances like that bone dragon there, just walk right underneath them. It's no big deal. You can keep moving forward. And now we have our buddy Frankenstein, and he's brought a flea man along for the ride. And again, a classic Hammer horror movie, Frankenstein. These are all historic monster franchises, but they've been pivoted and put into a game like Castlevania. I'm not sure how Dracula ever became friends with all the Hammer monster movie guys. That's never explained in the lore, but it is incredible all the same. And now that we're into Dracula's castle proper and in the dungeon here, we have skeletons that are just throwing bones at you. And this is all iconic Castlevania. Every single one of these enemies basically is going to appear in almost every single Castlevania game moving forward. And to think that they were all invented for this one game, even the red skeletons, which are invincible, you can knock them down but they're going to get back up, it all comes from this first attempt. And to think that such an iconic franchise got so many things right from the start, it is hyper impressive to think they were able to key in and know what to do that quickly on a first attempt. That's like making a first film and it going on to win an Academy Award. That's how good this property truly is and how impressive it is that they got it so right. But even from the beginning of the franchise, Death is going to make an appearance. Now, Death isn't from any particular movies, not from any particular story. He is endemic in our lives. We all know he's coming first, and if there's one guarantee in life, is that we're not going to get out of it alive. But it's such an iconic Castlevania character. Now when I think of the concept of Death as a character, I think of this franchise. Death is no longer personified as a concept coming for us all. It is, in my imagination and mind's eye, a boss that you have to fight in a video game. And that's how much they did with the characters, that my brain now thinks of Death as a sickle-throwing bad guy that's friends with Dracula. It makes no sense, but it makes perfect sense. And I will say, getting towards the end of this game, the first game is probably the easiest, and they get harder from here, but I love how hard these games are, and I swear that's the same mouth from Super Mario Bros. 2. You tell me down in the comments below if I'm crazy. But again, just remember, jump, because if you jump too late, you fall down a pit. And of course, it's a Castlevania game, you gotta have a clock tower. And that's just what I mean when I talk about how iconic this first game is. It might not be the best 2D Castlevania game of all time, and I definitely don't think it is. I think it's an excellent game, but it is iconic. This is basically the Bible for the series. So much of what we're going to see moving forward in this very long retrospective is going to come directly from this game. But of course, it's not Castlevania without a Dracula fight, and this is the first time he ever appears, and we'll be fighting Dracula many times over the coming weeks. Like I said, I'm going to be doing a review and retrospective on every single mainline Castlevania game. But Dracula had to start somewhere, and he starts here. And if that looked familiar, that's because pretty much like half the Castlevania games keep remaking that staircase level to Dracula's Keep over and over again. He's definitely an interesting looking Dracula. Looks like an old man more than he does a monster. But I mean, it's the NES and you only had so much ability to draw sprites onto the screen. They were never going to look perfect. But old Simon Belmont here is now fighting this guy, and I guess that is a Dracula. I've never been keen on his initial design. It gets a lot better moving forward, but this is basically the progenitor of the Dracula you would see in Rondo of Blood in the beginning of the Symphony of the Night. And once we get to those games, we're really going to be in Castlevania heaven. But of course, Dracula is dead, he's defeated, and that's how the lore goes. Dracula never really wins, and we can move on to the credits, which are quite fun, watching the castle crumble back into its foundations, a trope they're going to be seeing in almost every single game. But yeah guys, that is the first episode of Castlevania Chronicles. We're going to be having a lot of different episodes, but even in that movie tie-in, if you watch the names of the characters that created this, written by Bram Stoker. Well, Bram Stoker wrote the original Dracula, a lot of what this is based off of, and Christopher B being Christopher Lee. There's so many name references like Boris Karloffis there, who played the Wolfman. You can definitely tell that they were leaning into the movie influence heavily. But like I said, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like, subscribe, leave me a comment if you have any questions. We'll be back next week with more Castlevania, but we'll see you next time. Bye bye.